Hello, I'm Porschia Parker Griffin, and I want to welcome you to the Career 101 podcast, a place for ambitious professionals and seasoned executives who want an edge in their career. We're talking about all of the things you were never taught or told when it comes to career growth, development, and change. Now, let's get into it. Today, we are talking about Reinvention 101, how to reinvent yourself with Tracy Oswald. Tracy Oswald, a visionary leader with a proven track record in driving business transformation, is the founder and CEO of Women Who Lead. This innovative company and community focuses on revolutionizing the way women work, live, grow, and lead. With over 2 decades of experience leading successful teams and programs, Tracy is acutely aware of the unique challenges that high achieving women face. Her mission is to help women advance in their careers without sacrificing their physical and mental well being. As a certified coach, keynote speaker, and former corporate VP, Tracy has spoken across the country and hosted a business podcast for USA Today. She has delivered keynote presentations and workshops for organizations such as Gong, the Texas Business Women's Association, the Project Management Institute, USA Today Network, Florida Press Association, Dress for Success, and Innovation Media Enterprises. Tracy holds a certification as a certified professional coach from the Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching, and has completed various professional development courses through Dale Carnegie Training and LinkedIn Learning. Hi, Tracy. How are you today?
Hello. Wonderful. So excited to be here, Portia.
Well, great. We are excited to have you with us to discuss Reinvention 101, how to reinvent yourself. But first, we want to know a little bit more about you. So tell me about 7-year-old Tracy.
It's so funny that this is a question because just recently I was going through some old pictures from when my brothers and sisters were really young. So we're talking like in the late 70s. And there was this picture of myself. I remember it was in second grade. So I had just gotten like 2 new big teeth that looked so out of place in my mouth. And picture was me outside. I had like a dandelion in my hand, with really long hair. It was white all over the place. And I had this sort of like sly smile on my face. And my eyes were super wise, way too wise for like a 7-year-old. And I think back to that version of me. And I think, especially before we get all of the programming about how things are hard and how life is scary and all of that, we have an inner knowing that life is magical, things happen that you can't explain. And was the picture, that's what I saw in that picture. And I think that was the essence of who I was. Was much wiser at 7 than I probably am today.
Yeah. I loved how you described that look. And I think you're right. As children, there's this sense of innocence, but I think also the ability to dream big and believe that anything is possible that should really be nurtured and that most of us lose, I think, along the way.
Sure.
And we know that as coaches, right? We end up helping clients to discover some of those things again. But when you think back to 7-year-old Tracy, what did she want to be when she grew up?
So I thought I was going to be a professional dinosaur person. I was obsessed with dinosaurs.
Uh-huh.
I would write papers about dinosaurs that no one asked me to write. And I memorized all of the names and looked them in the encyclopedias at that time. That's what we had. Well, I'm a huge reader. I wanted to know all of the things, and life was super exciting. I would say it was, and so I'm very much an introvert when it comes to reliving a lot of my life in my head, right? And I did back then. There was a kindness that I don't believe I lost. I understood about love and community and wanting to be connected in ways that were more meaningful than just small talk on the playground, really wanting to understand people. And so I spent a lot of time with adults because they could talk to me that way. So when you asked me to reflect back on her, I would think my goal is to spend the rest of my life to getting to who that was.
I love that. So, what was your first job, Tracy?
Oh my gosh. I was a newspaper girl. I was in sixth grade and I had a newspaper route and after school, I would drive to the newspaper place where I got all my papers, do my route, collect it on Tuesdays and Sundays. And I did it for a couple of years, but it seriousness where I wanted to be mixing it up or be doing to learn. That's very much how I learn is by actually doing the thing. And it taught me so much about, you know, people and about consistency and about when it's 95 degrees and I don't want to do it or 32 degrees and I don't want to do it, but people are waiting for their newspaper, what to do. So a lot of fun, but also hugely pleasant.
Yeah, I was just thinking to your point, even before you said the 95 degrees and that mental fortitude to keep going, I was thinking you had to be very disciplined with that newspaper route, right? Because there's no one technically over your shoulder the whole time as you're doing it, right? So that tells me a lot about you and that you were very disciplined growing up. So great. Well, tell us about some highlights or pivotal moments in your career before you started your business, Tracy.
Yeah. So remember, I was in sales for a lot of my career. And being in a sales office is very different. In corporate, is very different than being in the corporate office. And I remember when I made that transition from the sales office to the corporate office, when I moved from New York to Texas about 10 years ago, I was late to the game inside of corporate and was not prepared for how political things were. And it was shocking to me because in sales is sales. You meet your client, then grow and you talk to your sales teams and you coach your people. And there's not a lot of that kind of back and forth politics where you have to talk to this one to get to that one and who's trying. It was a shock to me later in my life to have to learn to navigate. So that was a big one. I think another one was it in my late 30s and I was in a sales leadership position. And up till then, I always thought that there was going to come a time where I felt like, so I always thought there was the people that were in charge totally knew what they were doing. Like I thought they had it all together. They were super confident. They had all the answers. And I was in a meeting and I can't even remember what it was about. And I just had this realization that like literally no one knows what they're doing. Like no one knows what they're doing. Everyone's making it up and doing the best they can. And there's no one right answer to anything. And it was a huge understanding for me at that time because I was brought up at a time where you look to authority to tell you how to do things. And I was shocked and also very disappointed that I've been listening to so many people who really no better idea than I might have had. So that's really big learning.
Yeah, yeah. I Wow. So a lot there that I can definitely echo and I've seen with our clients and even in my own career. I like how you touched on really starting to see the political side of some offices and some careers in different settings. That is something that comes up with a lot of
Oh
our
yeah.
clients. And depending on their background, it is a shock, like you mentioned. And then I also love your point about how you realized everyone didn't necessarily have it figured all out. I had a similar realization, and I have a sales background too, Tracy. And when I got into sales and I started selling to CEOs, there were CFOs, but higher level prospects in companies. And I realized these people aren't any smarter than I am. These people aren't any smarter than some of the people that we work with. And it really shifted things in
Oh,
my mindset as well. So it sounds like you might have had a similar.
oh yes. It was shocking. I was disappointed, but then also it opened up so many doors for me. Like if they can have this kind of role and do this kind of thing, do anything. We so yeah. You
Absolutely. So what has been your biggest career challenge so far before you started your business?
So I think there was a time when it was at the party and it was it had started as a startup and it was in its adolescent phase. And we were super successful. And I was in a leadership role there, leading a team. And a huge, big media company came in and bought us. And was part of working through the transition of how do we bring together this small company and this company. While I was doing that, I saw the writing on the wall when it came to the team that I ran and the similar team on the larger company. They just had so much more technology and people and bandwidth. And so I was like, they're not going to need two leaders. Right? I had to make a decision. Do I want to decide to go for that role, or is this an opportunity maybe for me to pivot and do something entirely different? Reinvention inside company. Right? And so I decided that I wanted to, because I have a very high risk tolerance and I like to take chances on things. And I was at a point in my maturity and competence in career where I thought, I'm gonna really go for something. And it might pan out and it might not. But I pitched really big idea to the CEO at the time to lead a whole different part of the business, client facing, going out into different cities in the country and educating them and together a whole plan. And but I had nothing to lose. And she said yes. And that was like a big clue for me that the more you show up with that kind of energy and say, well, what's possible? Like what all things are equal and I could do this or I could do something totally different. Let's try this different other thing. The worst that could happen is if they say no or I try and fail, and I can then just try the next thing. So I think that was a moment where it was challenging in the sense that I was risking all of the safety and political capital and cultural capital that I had built inside of this team to totally strike out in a completely different direction.
Yeah, the reinvention.
Yeah. Yes.
What made you decide to start your business, Tracy?
So I was leading a talent development team and I had an idea that I wanted to start a leadership coaching program inside of the talent development team for jurors and vice presidents because there was really no support at that level. And put a proposal together to my boss and said, hey, if you need for me to get certified, I can start this, okay, do this for our company. And here's all the downstream benefits, the whole cost analysis, all of it. When they said yes, it was great. And it was my first day. The coach training took place over 9 months. And there were 3 times we had to go to the physical location for like a weekend. And then everything else was virtual. On my first day, like within the first hour of this instructor talking and doing the orientation and talking about what this was, I was like, oh no, right. I want to do this for me. Like I want to be a coach in the business and actually do this. Right? And it felt weird, right? Because I was there on my company's dime and I have this big life realization. And so I did something that was scary at the time. And I did it for my company, of course, but I started my own business while I was working full time as a corporate executive. And that was also very scary and risky.
Yeah. Well, one, we went through the same coach training organization, I'll say. And
That's nice.
yes, and I had a very powerful experience at what then we called Mod One, that first
Yes.
weekend as well. So I can definitely attest to that. Um, but it's also great that you found the courage to start that business while you were still working. That is another whole thing that could be a different
Uh,
podcast episode,
yes.
Tracy, that we might have to bring you back for on another time.
Yeah. Right.
But yeah, it's great that you had that knowing right from the coach certification training that, hey, I want to start my own business.
But can I, in full transparency, because I don't want everyone to think, oh, this was just so easy. I stressed, like I built my own website. I think it was on Wix. I didn't set it live. I was stressing so much that the minute I set it live, like your mind plays games. The minute I set it live, like somehow everyone in my company was going to find out, right?
Uh-huh.
Logical. That didn't happen. But there's this guilt that I had because of this inherited sense of having to be loyal to company, right? Disproportionately so, more loyal to the company than to myself, which that's a whole nother topic, that I delayed for days and days hitting that go live button. And do you know what happened when I hit the go live button? Nothing. No one said anything until I brought it to their attention because I felt like, well, they find out and I don't tell them. Like I felt like on HR and all of that. But I had so much drama and so much fear. And so if anyone out there is going through, that's perfectly normal. You are not alone. It happens.
Agreed. So that's a great segue, Tracy. Many of our clients who are executives or professionals get to a point where they decide that they want to reinvent themselves. It could be in regards to their career or their business. Why do you think reinvention is important?
So I think because this is 2023 and because technology is moving so quickly, I think it's even more relevant than it's ever been. But even if that wasn't the case, Portia, and I would love, like, if we have time, I would love to get into what the future of work might look like because of how quickly technology is moving. Two biggest like life lessons that I ever learned. I said one of them already. Everything is made up. We have made up everything, right? From what things mean to, I like to describe as we get older, we miss playing with kids in the playground. So we invent businesses, types like systems as a way to play with each other, do it with higher stakes and on different levels. We've made all of this up. Everything we have, everything we see. And everything's always changing. That's my rule number two. And because everything's made up and everything's always changing, the reinvention at its core is simply trying to stay at parity or a little ahead of where everything's going. And if, in my opinion, if you are not to speed with where things are going, especially now with technology and how much it's going through, it's going to be really hard for you to catch up. So I think reinvention is simply making a decision, redeciding every day about how you're going to grow. And it can be in small and fun ways. It doesn't have to be this big, heavy, complex plan you put into place, but it can be going back to a 7-year-old. One of the things, I give a couple of different talks for companies. One is about the future of work. And so many people, when I give that talk, is challenged. They bring up this. I don't have time to keep up. I can't catch up with all of my work and catch up with how fast the world is moving. And I offer like, you don't have to catch up. You just have to remember how to play catch. Right? You remember how to be a kid. You just don't remember where the playgrounds are. And the playgrounds are now where technology is taking us, then we have to bridge that gap between how we use that to deepen connection to each other.
The Career 101 podcast is brought to you by Fly High Coaching, where we help our clients soar to their full potential. More and more professionals and executives are setting out to achieve their career goals. But without the right support, it can be difficult, if not impossible. Whether you need career coaching, interview coaching, or a professional resume, we're here to help. Check us out on our website, fly-highcoaching.com. So from your experience, what are the main aspects involved with reinventing yourself?
Yeah. So I think with reinvention, whether it's I think it's different, whether it's by someone else's decision or your own decision. So I'm gonna talk about this through the lens of what happened for me. That's cool. Because what happened for me, right, is I was this corporate executive, coaching full side. There was a big company that I worked for, and I got laid off. And so we laid off in last September. And so that was talk about defining moments in your life. First time I ever got laid off in my whole career. And I decided, okay, this is my moment. I have to reinvent myself. It was out of necessity. I don't say it was necessarily out of bravery. I think there are great specific things that happen through a reinvention, whether you decide or whether you find yourself in this place where you've got to reinvent yourself. One is you are going to experience lots of uncomfortable feelings, and you're going to want to stop doing whatever kind of growth you're doing because you don't want to feel those feelings. And when I say you, I mean me. In getting laid off and not having that support system, not having all of those people anymore, and going full force into my coaching business, I had more time to myself than I knew what to do with. And when you are faced with time to yourself, all the feelings you've been stuffing down because you've been so busy come up. And you have a decision to make: is either you're going to face those feelings and really feel them and understand them, or you're going to make yourself busy doing productivity things to avoid feeling those feelings. So I think number one is being very aware that can feel really bad. And that's okay. Can feel really bad. I think the second thing is, when it comes to reinvention, think about it like you're this mad scientist and you're simply experimenting with things. Because what I did a little bit, and what I've been talking to so many women who are going through the same thing or want to reinvent themselves, they think they have to pick a thing and stick with the thing, because that's going to be their new thing. Well, they'll never give themselves a chance to experiment with things they never would have tried in the past. So think like a scientist, experiment, see what works, see what ingredients you might need to add a little here, take a little there, try a new experiment if that doesn't work, and approach it not like this is the only way I can go. Approach it like, how many different ways could I go? Well, how can that be fun? How can that be interesting? How can that be exciting? Because I was this incredible scientist trying to figure out living a life through experimentation. And number three, when it comes to reinvention, especially if you are, this isn't categorically true. I'm a Gen X. I consider myself Gen X, right? I'm on the high end of Gen X. So I'm closer to Boomer than I am to millennials. When you have been doing something for a long time in a career, and you have this idea that you want to reinvent yourself, and let's say you go for it, there can be, and there really is, this sense of, wait, I invested so much of my life doing this thing, but does it mean that was all for nothing? Like, how do I start over at this point in my life, wherever that point is. And everyone's so invested in the thing they do for their career that they talk themselves into the fact that it's too late, whatever that means. I think if you're still alive, it's not too late, right? They talk themselves into the fact that I've put so much time for, maybe I have 3 degrees in this thing. I can't start a new thing because then I would be a beginner again. And there's nothing like something that your ego eats worse than being a beginner again, especially when it knows you're really good at this other thing. I think that's a big thing to be on the lookout for is this sense of holding on way past the expiration date on the thing, even though you have so many skills and so many contacts and all of that in this one bucket, but allowing yourself to be a beginner you in something new and risky and interesting.
I love those, Tracy. I love those. So, to recap for the listeners, number one was being aware of the uncomfortable feelings that you might have. Number two was thinking like a scientist and not being afraid to experiment. And three was being a beginner and not necessarily holding on to the past. And those are really great. And it leads me again to my next question. So, I want to get your thoughts on this. I've had some clients tell me that they are apprehensive about reinventing themselves because they are scared to start over or start at the bottom. What would be your response to someone who feels that way?
So the core of my belief system and how I coach my clients is that life is always going to be 50-50 average. 50% of the time, you're going to feel good, and 50% of the time, it's going to suck. No amount of coaching or therapy is ever going to really change that percentage. Sometimes it's like 60-40 or something like that, but you are always going to have happiness about things, and you're always going to have fear about things. So my question to you is, would you would you rather fear? Would you rather fear making the change, or would you rather fear staying where you are and fearing what could I have become if I allowed myself to make the change? Knowing that fear is going to be present no matter what, because the reason that they are thinking about reinventing themselves is there's some measure of fear. Well, is this sustainable? Do I want to keep doing this? I'm afraid that I don't this mold anymore. There's fear, there's apprehension, and there is a sense of unhappiness that they already have. Well, you're gonna have it no matter what. Would you rather have it doing something that is new and exciting and that you essentially love to do? Or would you rather have it being the same as you are, fearing change, fearing reinvention, and also fearing the fact that maybe you're in a role that is not going to be in existence in a couple of years because of whatever technology or the company is going to run you off. So you got to pick your fear.
So, how long do you think it would take for an executive or professional to reinvent themselves?
I think that's so subjective to the person, and where they are and where they want to go. So I can't answer that. But what I can say is when it comes to knowing what the right steps are, a lot of times when you get to the executive level or management level, there is you're intelligent, you're smart, right? And you want to make the right moves. And so what I tend to see so many people, especially high achieving women, do is they want to learn their way, right? They want to book learn how to reinvent themselves. And they read all the books and they listen to podcasts and they make their lists and their plans. You know what I say? That is not going to help you at all, because the minute you step into the unknown, into the space of new invention, all bets are off, old rules don't apply, and things are going to happen that you would never have imagined happening. So all of you're just delaying doing the thing by learning about how to do the thing. So that's the piece of advice I would want to give people is do it a lot sooner than you think you're ready for, because you can study this and learn this and make this incredible plan. And you take one step forward and you're like, wow, this is nothing like I planned for. And now, so you have to decide, am I going to lean on my ways of being as a corporate executive and plan risk assessment? Or am I going to start to think like a scientist and step into the unknown and start experimenting? You're just delaying where you want to go. So I know that's not the question you asked, but that's the answer that I have.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great answer. And it definitely is subjective. And I've asked you some questions today that people ask me. I mean, I know you're
Yeah.
another coach and I want to get your perspective on it, but you're right. I generally tell people that a reinvention, or sometimes people are thinking about that in terms of a career change. A lot of that is subjective and it's going to depend on you, your industry, your geographical location, your transferable skills. How far away is this transition or reinvention from what you've done before? So, loved getting your feedback on that. Tell us more about your company, Women Who Lead.
Yeah. So I transitioned my coaching practice, and I've always focused on high achieving women. That's just where I love to play. And I want to help women, not just with work, because there's been a lot of coaching about risk that happens at work. But the older I get, Portia, the more I understand that when you plan for career success, I think it's like this shiny object that they put in front of you to say, plan your career success. But all the while, your life success is not being cared for. So I put the paradigm entirely and help women plan for life success. And there's not this work-life balance binary. I don't buy into it. I think our lives are like an orchestra, right? And in an orchestra, when an orchestra is playing a symphony, sometimes the French horn has the lead, and then it goes over to the flutes, and then the cello comes in and plays for a few bars. And we hear all of these different instruments have their moment, but it blends together seamlessly. And I think life is like that. Sometimes you're going to over-index up because you have to. Sometimes you have stuff going on at home where that has to be the focus. And trying to achieve balance is just a recipe for disaster, because balance only exists in a moment in time in perfect conditions without anything ever changing. So because everything's changing, because conditions are imperfect, I think that the focus on how can I craft a life and live in a way that supports me as the human first, who can give to these different areas of my life and all the relationships.
I love that. So, we'll be providing a link to your website and other social channels in our show notes so people can find you online. But what is the best way for someone to get in touch with you?
If y'all want to just get in touch with me to talk, there's two ways. You can email me at tracy@womenwholead.io, or you can find me on LinkedIn and just DM me. Because that's where I hang out, right? That's where I've got most of my videos and lives and posts and all of that. But I have been thinking about TikTok. I don't know. What are your thoughts? On TikTok?
I am not on TikTok, but I've heard great things about it. I think for me, I'm going to stay more focused on the podcast, but I think it's a great outlet.
Yeah, I didn't think about it. Yes. LinkedIn or email. Be happy to talk with you.
Great. So, Tracy, I want to ask you our last question that we like to ask all of our guests. How do you think executives or professionals can get a positive edge in their career?
Think to become more successful, you need to, number one, become a lot more vulnerable with yourself, with your people, with your feelings, the truth, with what's happening in your business, in your life. You need to be a lot more transparent with your people. And when I say your people, I don't only mean at work, I mean at home. Let people in, let people understand what's happening for you. And give messages to, if you have a team at work, tell them the truth more than you're comfortable with. And number three, we always staying ahead of where things are going from a cultural, societal, and technological perspective. Always be ahead of the curve in your understanding and knowledge.
Tracy, you've shared a lot of tips with us today. I'm sure that our listeners can use it to be more confident in their careers and with their reinvention. We appreciate you being with us.
Thanks so much, Portia.
This episode was brought to you by the Bravebird Career Alliance, the go-to membership designed for seasoned executives and ambitious professionals with everything you need for career planning, strategy, training, and support. Thank you again for listening to the Career 101 podcast. I hope you have at least one key takeaway that you can use in your own career. If you enjoyed hanging out with us, please rate, subscribe, and share this podcast. Until next time, here's to your success.